Hello and welcome to the Blood Reds Morning Bulletin. I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com writer, David Comerford, and we're going to be discussing the futures of the two Liverpool players who've been discussing their futures of for a very long time now. Both had interesting things to say about their futures yesterday in the media day at the Liverpool Training Centre. And first of all, let's start with Salah, who said he's definitely going to be staying for another season. What do you make of those comments?
Well, it's definitely obviously positive that we don't have to worry about him leaving this summer, because really what those comments say is to any clubs that were thinking about maybe making an offer for Salah, it's essentially saying, well, I'm not really interested in leaving. So it's good from that point of view. I guess the flip side of it, and the thing that's a little bit concerning, is that you do feel like there is kind of a creeping possibility that he's potentially going to end up leaving on a free transfer in 2023. And kind of maybe a more cynical reading of those comments is, I'll definitely be here next year, but, am I going to be here the year after that? He's not really thinking. He seems to be willing to take that path if it comes down to. Hopefully, obviously, there's an agreement that can be reached before then. But yeah, there's certainly two ways you can read the situation. I think I'll choose to go the more optimistic way for now.
Yeah, I think you have to be. There's still a year left on his contract, and they're still negotiating. Both parties are still involved in the negotiations, and that surely suggests that there is a potential there for an agreement, and Liverpool are keen to keep him at the club. So it is an interesting remark, but I think in terms of, I mean, maybe some people were worried that the likes of PSG or even Real Madrid, after missing out on Kylian Mbappe, would come in for him. It gives Liverpool fans a bit of security to not really worry about any sort of transfer possibility.
I think the PSG one is kind of maybe less of an issue now that obviously the Mbappe staying. I think the big one at the moment is Real Madrid, and it was actually something I wrote about on the site last week, because what they have is an Mbappe fund, essentially, is what it was billed as in the reports. So they've been spending quite a bit of time really making sacrifices when it comes to selling players, buying players. For example, they weren't really in for Haaland because they were so fixated on this idea of signing Mbappe. And I think the package that they had for him was worth about 400k a week or something like that. Obviously, it's a free transfer, but the wages are still going to be huge. So now that they've missed out on him, it's not really a case of wanting to recruit someone who's the same age and in the same position. I think, based on what I read, it's more about bringing in someone of a certain profile, because, they've had this really expensive renovation of the Bernabeu. They haven't won the Champions League for a few years. I think they really want to bring in the next superstar who's going to be the kind of the next, banner carrier really for the club. So Salah really is someone who, in terms of his profile as a player, is pretty similar to Mbappe. He's right up there. I think he's one of the top 10 most followed players on Instagram, for example. He's obviously got huge markers and presence as well. So I think as the actual signing, it might be seen as a natural plan B for Real Madrid to actually go for him, especially because, again, it could be a free transfer. And also because Salah has previously hinted at being open to playing in Spain later in his career. So whilst he is quite a bit older, I think we've seen, based on his kind of athletic performance, that he is probably someone who could carry on playing well into his mid-30s. So I reckon that the Mbappe deal last week has kind of raised the possibility a little bit that Real will be his destination. And I think it looks like potentially a clear option has emerged for him. So it maybe raises the pressure on Liverpool a bit.
Yeah, certainly so. But I think you would say if he did mean what he said, and he is going to be staying this summer, then I think that gives Liverpool a bit of an advantage because Real Madrid have to act now this summer to really fill that Mbappe void in the supporters' hearts. So I think in that sense, I would say there is a potential for optimism there. But then again, it's not just Salah who's a high-profile attacker with a year left on his contract at Liverpool. Sadio Mane is in the same situation, and he left an even more cryptic message than Salah yesterday in the media day at Liverpool when he was asked about his future, and he said that he will let everyone know after the Champions League final. What did you think of those comments?
Well, it is worrying, isn't it? Because I guess what it comes down to is if he was going to stay, he wouldn't have said that, is what I'm thinking. Because whilst he might not want to just talk about his future at all in the lead up to a final, and I obviously understand that, there's different ways of saying it almost. It implies really that a decision's been made, is what it does. So, he could have it kind of intimated in his answer that he was happy where he was. He didn't really do that. It kind of read more like, yeah, I'm actually going to leave, but I don't want to create that huge headline before the final. But he has created a pretty big headline anyway, to be fair with what he said. So, yeah, it is a concern on that one. I think Liverpool might be a little bit alarmed by it, but maybe the element of saying I'll announce it after the game. Could there be a possibility there that it's a contingent on whether Liverpool win? If Liverpool win the game, does he think he's achieved everything he wants to achieve at Liverpool and he wants kind of a new challenge? Or is it, not really dependent on the outcome? And like I say, just want to avoid a distraction. So interesting from that point of view, but certainly I find it hard to view it any other way than him thinking about leaving, to be honest.
Yeah, to play the devil's advocate here, I think the difficult situation Liverpool find themselves in is they have 3 world-class attackers, all with a year left on their contract, or about to enter their 30s or already 30 years of age. And the risk you play there is if you give all of them long-term contracts, you don't want to be approaching in 2 or 3 years' time, having to replace all of them at the same time. And I suppose Liverpool will look at it now with Bayern Munich heavily rumoured and interested in Sadio Mane as potential to make money on a 29-year-old forward who is still at his peak, I would say. But there is a market there and potentially some players who can replace Mane. For example, Christopher Nkunku might be available. I know the Leipzig sporting director said he doesn't want to sell this summer, but we've heard that kind of talk from sporting directors in the past, and you kind of have to take that with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, it sounds like that could easily be just kind of posturing before the window, really, because if you talk about a player being available and being willing to sell, obviously sometimes that can have the effect of lowering their value. I think the interesting thing with Mane and kind of replacements potentially is, I think I read yesterday that Liverpool's demands are only about 50 million euros, and I think that links back to what you're saying there in terms of like his age and maybe thinking, given his contract situation, you can't demand a huge amount of money. I think 50 million euros is about kind of 44 million pounds. So not a huge amount of money to play with if we go with kind of that practice of spending what we've made almost. Obviously Liverpool can be kind of committed to the self-sustaining model, and there might obviously be more money to spend. I think if there is, then Nkunku's the man really. I think he's probably going to cost a couple of brackets above that kind of 40 million range. I personally think he'd obviously be a great sign. He's got the versatility of playing so many positions. He's had an amazing season, and I think he's going to be certainly getting a move to an elite team. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether Liverpool are shopping it in that kind of top window for forward options if they lose Mane, or whether they almost go for another Mane, someone who's maybe playing at a slightly lower level, but they feel can explode with a big move.
Yeah, certainly some interesting comments from both Liverpool stars. But I think the point is that they are not necessarily irreplaceable. As good as they are, Liverpool's system and the way the scouting network works, we saw it with Luis Diaz. There are players out there in the markets who can replace both Mane and Salah, and there's not necessarily a cause for concern, is there?
No, I think whilst these are kind of, at the upper end of the scale in terms of they are some of the best players in their positions, and it would certainly hurt to lose either of them. I think you have to look at it, and you probably just have to have faith in the recruitment. I think the preference of every Liverpool supporter is to keep them, because I think they've both shown in different ways that they can still have longevity at the top level. But worst comes to worst, I think we have a very, very good hit rate when it comes to identifying players. So hopefully the drop off wouldn't be too big, and we can find someone who can maybe put up similar numbers within kind of 18 months of arriving.
Yeah, let's hope so. Thanks, Dave, for joining me, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Make sure to check out the rest of the Blood Red content going out today and all the written content on Liverpool.com. Thanks everyone for tuning in.